Welcome back. Today in this class we'll be starting a new topic called agency. Agency is quite interesting topic. Maybe all of you are familiar with what is agency. So you are familiar who's a principal and agent. This agency is even dealt in our Indian Contracts Act. So now let's know what is there in our Indian Contract Act, what are the sections which define agency and other provisions relating to agencies. Before starting with what is agency as per sections of Indian Contract Act, let's try to know what is a simple meaning of agency. Agency, before knowing agency, we'll try to know who is an agent. Then we'll try to define the relationship of agency. Fine. So, the first thing is agent. Who is an agent? You can say one who agrees and is authorized to act on behalf of another, that another being called principal, to legally bind an individual in particular business transaction with the third parties pursuant to an agency relationship. I think this definition is very much clear. It says that, now let's break and understand. Agent is a person. Is one person who agrees, who is giving his consent. Yes, I'll do this. And is authorized. Remember all these words. Agrees, consent is important and should be authorized. Authorized by whom? None other than principal. Who is a principal now? Principal is a person on behalf of another whom he is acting. So, who is authorized to act on behalf of another, that another is principal. That is, the agent is giving his free consent and is also authorized by a person on behalf of whom he is acting, that is the principal. See, by this very one sentence only, you have got to know almost all the essentials of the agency. Next, we'll proceed to legally bind an individual in particular business transaction. Why is he appointed as an agent? He is appointed as an agent in order to make a contract. That is, how is the contract formed? When it is legally binding on the parties, then only it's called a valid contract, right? Yes. To legally bind an individual, that another person and the principal, binding them legally in a particular business transaction. Remember this word. Why particular is stressed here is, he is authorized, the agent is authorized to do a particular transaction. So that's all. I'm sorry. That's all. He is not given the entire authority to do business as he wants. No, he is just authorized to do any particular business transaction. He may be authorized for other transactions also, but here under agency we talk about some particular business transaction also. It may be others also, it may be authorized for others also, or any one particular also. Got it? Particular business transaction with the third parties. That means that apart from two persons we discussed here, who are they? Agent and principal. There is one more party, that is a third party pursuant to agency relationship. It says that this agent is a person who gives his free consent and is also authorized by the principal to make a legally binding contract in a particular business transaction with a third party, so that the third party and the principal are actually there in the business. This agent, he'll assist them. Simple? Clear? So there is a agency relationship existing when the agent is acting on behalf of the principal and is saying, see, I'm authorized to do this, we'll enter into a contract. But still, who is the main person behind agent is the principal. Clear? Yes. So, now all this constitute the agency relationship. Clear? Got to know the meaning of agency? Agency means a relationship that exists between the principal and the agent. I hope it is clear. We'll proceed. Now, after knowing the meaning of agent and also the agency relationship, when does the agency relationship exist? Now, let us try to know what under which section is the agency or agent dealt with. In your Indian Contract Act, they have given the definition of agent. So, it says that section 182 of Indian Contract Act gives the meaning of agent. So, it says that an agent is a person. So, an agent is a person employed to do any act for another or represent another in dealing with the third parties. The person to whom such act is done or to whom he represents is the principal. So, from this definition only, you get the meaning of what is an agent and what is exactly the agency relationship. Clear? Here also it says that an agent is a person. He is a person who is employed to do any act for another. He is employed to do an act for another. Who is that another? It is the principal. Or to represent another in a dealing with third party. He is representing his principal with a third party. Yeah, we'll go further. I'll give you some examples and all, so that you'll be clear who is a third party, who's a principal, who's an agent. It is very simple, but remember this: represent another in dealing with a third party or parties. Full stop. The person to whom such an act is done or whom he is represented is called the principal. Got it? I'll give you an example now. Now, I am working in a company, some company. So I have a boss who is my principal and I am his agent. He says to me, you go and sell this particular products to some person, and see the price should be only you should sell this within 25,000 to 30,000, not lesser than that or not more than that. You have to sell so much and you have to give back the money. For that I will be giving you some amount. That is different. Giving some amount to agent is different. Don't confuse it. So it says that he is authorizing me. He is the principal. My boss is authorizing me. You go and sell this product. He is also quoting the price. He is saying you have to sell between this price. He is authorizing. He is giving me every the details, saying that you have to do this transaction like this. This particular goods he is giving me. He is giving any goods. Take for example some scale or pens. He is saying you have to sell income. I go to that person. See, I say that. See, I am from so and so company. Let us assume it to be XYZ company. I am from XYZ company. And I am representing my boss. I am his agent. So I will be selling you this. And I say that the price amount is so much. Whatever is quoted by my boss. So now, what am I? I am an agent. I have a principal whom I have to obey. And I am authorized by him to sell this particular product. Who is the person? See, he is the third party. Clear with the example? So here why I gave you this example, for your better understanding to know who's a principal, who's an agent and who's a third party. I hope you are clear with the definition and as well as the parties. So who are the parties in agency? The two main important parties are the principal and the agent. Got it? Principal is a person who authorizes on his behalf to represent him or to act on behalf of him. So he is a principal, and the person who is acting or who is representing a person is the agent. I think you are clear with this. Next we'll proceed. Now we got to know from this some important points. And what are these points? The person who delegates the work, who delegates the authority, to be more clear, the person who delegates the authority is known as principal. That is, he is delegating. Delegating means he is giving the authority. That is, you take this authority, I am giving it to you. So, the person who delegates the authority is known as principal, and to whom the power is being delegated, to whom that power is coming, he is the agent. Remember this way. Okay, these are some of the important points. And the relationship that is created is the relationship of agency. So, the person who acts in place of another is the agent, and the person on whose behalf he acts is the principal. This agency relationship can be implied or expressed. It is not necessary that when the courts were deciding the cases, it is not necessary that there should be an expressly given in writing that there exists a principal and agent relationship. By the very circumstances, whatever has taken place, facts, looking at the facts and circumstances, the agency relationship can be determined. So remember, the agency relationship can be implied or else it can be expressly given. Now let's know how to establish this agency relationship. I told you that the agency relationship can be expressed or implied. When it is expressly written, okay fine, you can make it out. But by implication, yes, by knowing the facts and the circumstances, then you can make out how exactly the court decided in few cases. Now let's deal with it. Let's know how to establish the agency. This is also a very important topic. So let's know one by one. We'll always take a case law so it will be easier, much easier for you to understand. The first case law is Loon Karan versus John and Company. So in this case, a person was authorized by the government of Assam to purchase and sell the yarn. He had got this exclusive right to purchase as well as sell it, and no one else got it. So, now, what was the question before the court was whether this person who has got an exclusive right to purchase and sell the yarn becomes an agent and the government becomes a principal, whether the agency relationship is existing between them or not. And also in the agreement, it was written like as if he is an agent. There was an agreement, yes, between the government as well as this person, that there is the agency relationship. But now the question was, do you really think that there is an agency relationship? When the court was trying to find out, what they found out there was certain facts that this person who has got a right to purchase and sell the yarn, he was doing for us from solely on his name. It was nowhere it was mentioned as it belongs to the government. He was doing all the transactions in his own name, and it was exclusively his business transaction. Nowhere by implication also it showed that he was an agent of the government. So the court held that since there is no agent and principal relationship, there cannot be an agency relationship here. What was held was there is nothing to show that there exists a principal and agent relationship, since the person who has got an exclusive right from the government is doing the business transaction in his own name, and even by implication also you cannot make out that it is an agent and principal relationship. So there exists no agency relationship. Now let's move on to the next case law, that is Shakti Sugars Limited versus Union of India. In this case, the State Trading Corporation, which is a legal entity, it was permitted to export sugar. Now, the question which came before the court in this case relevant to our agency relationship was, the State Trading Corporation being legal entity, the government allowed to export the sugar. Now does this state trading corporation become the agent of the Union of India? It is exercising, the state trading corporation is exercising only its commercial functions, right? That is exporting the sugar. It is basically exporting the sugar. That's it. So here it was held that the position of state trading corporation is just like an individual who has been authorized to export certain goods. How does he is authorized this? By providing the license. So whenever there is some export or imported related things happening, a person has to procure a license, right? So here also it is the same way. He is just given a license, so he becomes a licensee. He is in the possession of a licensee rather than the agent of Union of India. So basically it was held that he is not an agent at all. Since he is just permitted to export the sugar, is he doing any function on behalf of the principal? Has principal authorized him to do any function? Any business transaction? No, he was just given a license. Yeah, okay man, you can go export the sugar, that's all. So when you're talking about agency relationship, there should be some authorization given to the agent. So it was not given here, it was absent. There was no implied contract also, even expressly also it was not written. He is just a licensee rather than an agent. Clear? Okay. Now let's move to the next one, that is Chairman Life Insurance Corporation versus Rajiv Kumar Bhaskar. So this case is quite interesting. The LIC provided a scheme called Salary Saving Scheme. And they entered into a tripartite contract with the employer, employees and the LIC. They entered into a contract saying that the employer solely takes the responsibility. He is taking the responsibility to pay the premium of all the employees together. That is, he's assuring LIC that I have my employees in my bank, so I assure you that we'll all together, whatever the premium amount which they have to pay every month, we'll do one thing, I'll pay it together through one check. So from one check only, everybody's premium is being paid by the employer to the LIC. So there is no individual premium notice. So you must be seeing whenever you have an LIC and your premium is due, you may be getting a letter, right? So those letter, nothing notice was not sent to the employees. It was directly going from the employer to the LIC. And also this employer, it was his responsibility. It was his responsibility to inform if there is any changes in the management. In the sense, see, it is not the same number of employees who are staying in the organization. One may be leaving, otherwise death of some employee. So there may be change in the staff, right? So this was not, it was the corporation duty, or you can say the employer's duty to inform to the LIC. Then the employees were also not made aware of the communication between the employer and the LIC. Whatever is happening between the employer and LIC is between them. The employee being in party to the agent, I told you it is three parties, there was a tripartite contract. So in spite of they becoming a party to the agreement, still they were not informed. Everything happened between LIC and the employer. So now whenever there is change or death, or somebody has resigned from the company, or if they are retired, it is the duty to inform, but there was nothing informed about such changes. So now the question was, the question is whether this comes under whether the employer who is paying on behalf of the employees becomes an agent of the LIC. It was held that yes, he, though as per regulations and all, he does not become an agent. Nowhere it is stated that he's an agent. He's a party to the contract. He is nowhere stated that he's an agent. He's taking the responsibility of and acting on behalf of the principal. So they are never there is never any agent and principal that existed. But whatever the act he was doing, that is on behalf of the LIC, he was collecting the money. So the court held that by his very acts he became the agent of LIC, and LIC became the principal. Clear with the case? Very simple facts. Just remember the facts like this. There are three parties to an agreement. One is the employer, employee, and the LIC. They have introduced a scheme called salary savings scheme. Salary savings scheme. And in that scheme, the employer takes up the responsibility that he will be paying the premium through one check on behalf of all the employees. That's all. So, whatever the further transaction happened, it was between LIC and employer. LIC and the employer, and there was no notice also sent that the premium is due for this month. No notice as such was sent, and if there was any change, that also has to be informed by whom? It was to be informed by the LIC and the employer. That's all. Because nothing used to go to employee. He was not aware of, the employees were not aware of anything. So it was held by the court that the employer here in this case, by his very acts, he becomes the agent of LIC. Though it's not expressly given, and even the no regulations of LIC says that that the employer becomes the agent, still he becomes an agent. Clear with the facts? Yes. Now let's proceed to the next case now. That is Delhi Electric Supply Undertaking versus Basanti Devi, Srimati Basanti Devi. This is also a quite interesting case, which again, it's a case of LIC. What happens under an agreement between Delhi Electric Supply Undertaking, in short you can write it as DESU. There was an agreement between Delhi Electric Supply Undertaking and LIC, under which the employer of Delhi Electric Supply Undertaking, DESU, was to deduct some insurance premium amount every month from the salary of the employer. You must be thinking, why are you repeating the case? It is almost same, but a small change. It is almost the same, but there was one small change here. I'll explain you why Basanti Devi came into picture. Then he was paying under the same scheme, and that is again the same scheme, that is salary savings scheme. So this was happening every month, and the employer had taken the sole responsibility of paying it. Now what happened once there was a failure on the part of the employer to remit the insurance premium, which was deducted from the salary, and that person was deceased. I mean, he was dead. So the person died. That month's particular salary of that person who died was deducted. The premium was deducted, but he did not remit it to the LIC. Now there was an action brought by the legal representatives of that person who died. Legal representative is Basanti Devi. She brought an action against the employer under Consumer Protection Act, saying that the employer was liable to pay them. This case went to both national as well as state commission also of Consumer Protection Act, wherein both said that only the employer is liable, and LIC was discharged from its duties. It made only the employer liable. It said that yes, employer has to give whatever the insurance premium amount that was paid. It has to be, now because the person is dead, it has to be given it to his legal representatives, and it said that only employer is liable. LIC was discharged from this case. Then there was an appeal to the Supreme Court wherein it was said that no, how can you make how can you make the employer liable? Employer is acting as an agent of LIC. So, who has to pay? It is the LIC who has to pay to Srimati Basanti Devi, are the legal representatives of the person deceased. It said that that LIC was wrongly absolved from the liability by state and national commission. Absolved means that it was wrongly, the LIC was discharged from its duty, because LIC was liable, because LIC was a principal. Clear? And the employer was the agent. So LIC directed the LIC to pay 50,000 to Basanti Devi, who is the legal heir of the person deceased, and also some 25,000 on the default of payment. So in total, here it was held that for the acts of the agent, the principal was held liable, so the LIC was made liable. Remember, initially this case went to Consumer Protection Act, that is state as well as National Commission. There it was decided that employer is liable and not the LIC, but when there was an appeal to Supreme Court, the Supreme Court made LIC liable on the basis of what? Agency relationship. Got it? Yes. We have other cases also, wherein there is one case called Browhite versus Worcester Works Finance Limited. So there it was held that the House of Lords stated that there are some important points to be noted when there is a need for an agency to be created, agency relationship to be created. There should be a consent by both the parties. Who are both the parties? That is the agent and the principal. Both have to give their consent. It should be a free consent, in fact. Then what amounts in law to such a relationship? That there should be yes. See, if they say yes, the other person also should say yes. If the principal says no, then even the agent should say no. Both have to. Yes, one person has to be authorized. Other person should authorize him. What should take place? This transaction has to take place. Yes. No, if this transaction has not to take place. No, the agent should not go further. Then whatever the consent given, it can be expressed or implied. These were some of the conditions which were given in this case. That is Browhite WHITE versus Worcester's WORCESTER. Works Finance Limited. It's an English case. So do remember, they gave the highlights of the agency relationship. In another case, Sri Digvijaya Cement Company Limited versus State Trading Corporation of India. It was similar to this above case, Shakti Sugars Limited case, wherein there was a contract for the purchase of cement from the plaintiff by the from the State Trading Corporation. Sri Digvijaya Cement Company Limited is a plaintiff and State Trading Corporation STC was the defendant. So there was a contract for purchase of cement, and this plaintiffs they made some packaging material. It's a craft papers. They used to make certain bags. So for unutilized bags, a case was filed by the plaintiffs against the STC because they were storing it, STC was storing it, and for unutilized bags they filed a case. So the Delhi High Court held that there was a relationship of principal and agent in the respect of transaction, and the agency relationship was established in this case. Well, there are many other cases also pertaining to this. So these are some of the important cases. Now let's go to the next part, that is Test of agency. As I told you in one of the case that whatever that free consent is required and how it amounts to the agency relationship. If the agent claims for it, yes, even if the principal claims for anything, even the agent should also claim for it. If he disclaims anything, even the agent has to disclaim. That is, if the principal disclaim anything, even the agent also has to disclaim that thing. And their consent, whatever they give, it should be express or implied. Now, test of agency. What are the tests? After establishing, you know that how an agency relationship is established. Now let's know what are the tests of agency. So here I have given certain points. These 4 points are quite important. So it says that no agency merely by giving advice. What is this? No agency by giving merely advice. See, a person does not become an agent just by giving an advice. He gives some advice. Suppose there is one person, A. He gives an advice to B on some business transaction. See, you do like this. So I think then you can earn the profits. Going this way, the market share is like this. He may suggest him something. So A is saying that B, you do this particular work in this particular manner. Now does he become the agent? Does B becomes the agent of A? No, right? That is what is explained. There is no agency by just giving an advice. There should be an authority. There should be an agreement. At least if not agreement, there should be implied relationship at least that yes, there exists an agency relationship. The next part is every person who acts for another not an agent. What is this? Every person who acts for another is not agent. How do you say that? You just said that in the explanation, ma'am, that every person who acts on behalf of another is an agent. Now we are saying every person who acts for another is not an agent. How? It means that, see, suppose let's take an example. A cobbler is mending a shoes for another. Now there is some problem with my shoes. I go to a cobbler. I ask him to mend it. So does he become my agent? And do you think I become his principal? No, right? In the same way, if there is a servant who is working for me, does that servant becomes an agent? And do I become a principal? No. So that was explained here. Every person who acts for another, not an agent, there should be something which is legally binding, right? So this was established, this very point was established in Krishna versus Ganapati. In this case, every person who acts for another is not an agent was very well explained in that particular case. The next essential condition is, it says that there should be an authority. He should be clothed, that is the agent should be clothed with an authority. Clothed in a sense, he should be given the authority. By whom? By the principal. Such that it will bind him and make the principal answerable to the third party. Once whatever the agent does, he will be given that power, right, to do that work. So now if there is anything wrong or right, whatever it is, this agent is entering a transaction with a third party. So now whatever he does, the principal is answerable. So he is bound in such a way, he is given a power in such a way that the principal is answerable to the third party, and therefore for the contract, establishing a privity contract between third party and the principal. So it establishes a contract. By the acts of the agent, it establishes a contract between the principal and the third party. So this is a very essential condition under the test of agency. Now the fourth point says that all the above conditions to be satisfied. If all these conditions are satisfied, then you can say that there is agency relationship. Got it? Clear? Very simple. These are the case laws which give you how the agency relationship was established by the courts. Even there also, it says that in first case, by implied also and by implication also, there was no agency. What happened in second case? He was a licensee than an agent. In the third case, chairman of insurance, the employer became an agent even without an express writing. Right? Even in Delhi Electric Supply, it was held that DESU, yes, the employer was an agent. He failed in paying the premium of a person who died. And not only him, the LIC, since he's acting on behalf of the principal was made liable. So your agency relation was established, whereas in these two cases it was not established. From this only we get to know that this test of agency. Consent is very important. It should be a free consent of both the parties to act for each other. I mean, the agent is acting for the principal and the principal is authorizing the agent to act for him on behalf of him. Now we'll discuss with the new topic under agency. Who are the different kinds of agents? There are basically 4 different kinds of agents, you find them. First one is auctioneers, factors, brokers and telegraphy agents. These are the 4 different kinds of agents. Depending how it is classified here is depending on the kind of authority that an agent to act on behalf of a principal, the agents are classified here. So how much authority is given to them? Depending on that, you are classified into these 4. The first one being the auctioneers. Who is auctioneers? You must be knowing the word auction. You must have heard it. The person who assists in selling of some goods is an auctioneer, right? So here also it's the same. It says that an auctioneer is an agent. He is an agent whose business is to sell the goods or other property by auction, that is by an open sale. That is, he is making an open sale. The same way, so you say that auctioneer is the first point, he is an agent whose business is to sell the goods or property by auction, that is through open sale. Clear? So his authority is vested, the authority is vested with him only. No one else will get the authority except the auctioneer. He has got a right to sell the property. He has been authorized to sell the property. He just has an authority to sell, but he cannot give the warranty or guarantee for the goods and all unless he is authorized by the owner or the owner of that particular property. So he has to be authorized that yes, you can give the warranties also, you can say them that it is warranty. Till then he cannot do anything. He can only sell it. That's all. His duty ends after selling unless the contract has provided for that. So you can call him as a mercantile agent within the meaning of section 2 subsection 9 of Sale of Goods Act. So he comes under Sale of Goods Act as a mercantile agent. So a agent is authorized to sell the goods only and subject to the reserved price. So there's something called as reserved price. Reserved price is only that limit, there is some limit. That price should be, there's a limit fixed for the price under auction. So that limit which is fixed is called as reserve price. Whenever this agent, he has got a right to sell with this, keeping this reserve price in the mind. In case if he sells below the reserve price, there is a reserve price, and if he does not match with the reserve price, and if he is selling it below the price, and the person who is taking those goods, who is buying those goods, are purchasing it with a good faith and without a notice that the reserve price is so much and he is selling it for so much, he doesn't know that and he is taking it in a good faith, then such thing becomes valid. The buyer gets the good title in respect of such goods because he's taking it in good faith and without the notice of the reserve price. So this is just a part of condition. What happens if the auctioneer or the agent does not meet the reserve price? So buyer won't be liable for that. Remember, he is an agent whose duty is to sell the goods or property, and he is only authorized to sell. And in case if he is given in the contract terms and conditions of the contract, he is authorized to even give the warranties, then he may give. So he comes as a mercantile agent under Sale of Goods Act, and there is some reserve price fixed for that. And if the auctioneer is selling below that price, the person who's buying will get the good title over it. Without, there should one condition what is important is the buyer should not be having a notice of it, and he should be taking it in a good faith. The next point is factors. We have studied who are the factors when we were discussing about the lien. Who are these factors? Factors are the mercantile agents again. They are entrusted with the possession of the property. They're given, you take the property of the goods. Why are they given the possession? For sale. You take the possession, you can sell it. He also has a power to sell the goods on credit. Factor has got a power. It is what makes him different from others is he has got, even this person is selling, this person is selling, but this person has got one power, that is he can sell it on credit and also receive the same from the buyer, price from the buyer. He can sell it and he can receive the price from the buyer. And one more additional thing what is provided to him, as I told you, we discussed under the lien. Under section 171 of Indian Contract Act, he can exercise general lien over the properties for recovering the balance amount due. From whom? The principal. Yes, since we are talking about the principal and agent relationship, so if there is any amount due from the principal, then he has a right to lien over the property or goods. So he's got certain special things. What makes him different from others is even he has got a power to sell, but he can sell it on credit and can receive the same from the buyer, as well as he can exercise right to lien. Yeah. Next point is broker. Who are these brokers? We have heard of brokers, right? So how does he become an agent? Is he really an agent? Here, he does not. One thing what is differentiating him from others is he just negotiates between the parties. If A and B are there, they want to buy and sell a thing, some goods. There is a person called C who will help them negotiate it. There may be a problem by quoting the prices. So this person C will help them to negotiate it. So brokers are basically who help to negotiate the goods. On here, coming when we are talking about the agency, he will be negotiating on behalf of the principal with a third party. So since principal has given the authority, so he will come and negotiate with him, saying that, see, the principal has quoted this much, you also please try to get the amount to match with the that of the which is given by the principal. So here he is only given power to negotiate. That's it. So this makes him different from factors. Here factors, like what I told you about factors is he has got the possession of the goods, whereas the broker has got no possession of the goods. And also, he just makes two parties enter into a contract. He won't be a part of a contract nowhere. He just make two parties to enter into a contract and he receives a commission for that. Yeah. So the next one is del credere agents. This is quite different and also very interesting. Whatever we have studied the above, we got to know that the agent's duty is over as soon as he finishes with the transaction. That is, as soon as he enters the transaction on behalf of the principal, now he does not come into picture. In case if the default is made by the third party during for whatever the contract entered by the agent does not take up the responsibility. He doesn't do anything which is like required so that they can compel him to do the contract or file a case against him for making for the compensation. The agent does not come into picture. He says that my work is finished, I'll step back. So he is not answerable to the principal, since the principal has given the directions that go enter the contract with the third party. So he has entered into the contract. So he is no way answerable to the principal for whatever the third party does. If he performs the contract or if he is failing in performing the contract, he is not answerable to the principal. So under this, del credere agents, they became an exception to this point. They come as we can say that they come as a surety. They take an extra work. They're like an agent who come and who give an assurance to the principal that yes, the third party will will perform this contract. He is given an assurance that yes, principal, I'm assuring you that yes, the third party will perform this particular contract in the following manner. Whatever the terms and conditions are there laid down in the contract, yes, he will be performing it. And for this, he will be given a commission called as del credere commission. So the liability of the del credere agents is secondary in nature. Why do you think it is secondary in nature? Because it arises in case of failure of the third party. In case if he does not perform, then the principal can catch hold of this agent, del credere agent, and say that since the third party has not done it, you have to compensate for whatever the losses have incurred. So under this contract, del credere, this is a special type of agent wherein he comes and gives the assurance to the principal saying that the third party will perform the contract, and in case of failure by performance in the contract, he will be held liable. That is, the del credere agent will be held liable. So you have studied in this contract of guarantee that the surety's contract is always secondary contract. When the principal debtor fails to pay the amount to the creditor, it is the surety who comes into the picture then. If he does not make default, the surety does not come into the picture. Same way, relate him to the surety, that is giving an assurance to the principal that yes, I will be there, so that third party performs the contract. Next thing what we are going to learn in contract of agency is the features of contract of agency, or you can say even essentials. So these are the basic requirements which have to be there when you call it as a contract of agency. Now what are they? Let's see one by one. The first one says that the principal should be competent to contract. That's given under section 183. It says that, see this properly, he should be competent. That means he should be in a position to assign the agent to enter into a contract with the third party. This is the basic thing which is said in section 183. We'll come into detail. Now let's go to the other point. We'll see what the second requirement, that is feature of a contract of agency. That is, the agent may not be competent to contract. What is this? It says that the agent may not be competent to contract. That's given under section 184. It clearly says that yes, the agent may not be competent to the contract. How do you say this? for easy understanding, I have just made it into 2 parts. Whatever is given under section 184, I have just tried to make it into 2 parts and explain. Capacity of a contract, of an agent, you can take it as agent to act on behalf of the principal. So this person, agent who is appointed by the principal, is acting on behalf of the principal, isn't it? And then entering into a contract with third person. So therein, these 2 situations I have taken. First one is this, and second one is agent and principal. There is some sort of contract between, not a sort of, it is actually a contract between agent and principal to be an agent, right? So under these 2 circumstances, the agent usually has this 2 contracts to be entered in. So under this 2 situation, what were we discussing? Whether he should be competent or he may not be competent. May or may not. So let's see what happens. Now let's go to the third point. No consideration is necessary to create agency. That's given under section 185. No consideration. Why no consideration is necessary? We'll again go to each and every point in detail and see all the points. It is very clearly and beautifully explained, and features are also quite interesting. Now let's go one by one. The first one says that the principal should be competent to the contract. Remember always, the principal is a person who is delegating the authority, who is giving the power to the agent, and authorizing him. To be more technical, he is authorizing the agent to enter into a contract. Now, what do you think? In order to enter a contract, don't you think he should be competent? No. Now, competent means what according to contract law have we studied? What is competent? It means that he should be of age of majority. Number 1. Second one is he should be of sound mind. These are the 2 important things that constitute the competence of a person, right? It says that this person is competent. Even your section 183 gives the same definition, saying that any person who is of the age of majority as per the law and who is of sound mind can appoint or employ an agent. We are speaking from the perspective of the principal. Here we are speaking about the principal. So we say that he should be competent. So since he is appointing an agent, he should be competent to appoint an agent. He should be of sound mind as well as age of majority. That's what your section 183 says. Simple. Usually what happens, this agent enters into a contractual relationship with a third party. Right? So it is very important. That's why this point is also very important, where it says that since the contractual relationship is entered between 2 parties, not only principal but also the third party who is entering the contract should be of sound mind. And also it should be age of majority. Why? Because they should be capable of understanding what are there in the contract, right? They are the 2 most important persons in the contract. Agent he'll be just making a necessary, he's a link between the principal and the third party. So it is very important that both of them, that is the principal, most importantly from the perspective of agency we are speaking, so we are stressing here about principal. So the principal and third party should be competent to enter the contract. If this principal, now the question may arise. There is a contract and this person, and there is a person who has entered a contract and he is not competent to enter the contract. What happens to the contract? Does it binds the agent? What do you think the answer would be? Yes. If a person is not competent to enter a contract, even the agent cannot enter the contract. Even though he is appointed, that doesn't become valid. He also cannot enter the contract. So the principal has to be competent. Remember this, he should be competent to authorize the person, that is agent, to enter into a contract. Clear? Then one more important thing to be noted here. Whenever a person, that is a principal, is authorizing his agent to enter a contract, it means that he is personally entering the contract. Though his agent is entering, still he is personally entering. After agent making necessary things for the contract to be entered by the principal and the third party, he gets back. It is only the principal and a third party then. Right? So what I said is, he personally, if still the agent is appointed, still the principal is personally entering the contract, thereby he to be competent is very necessary. If a principal is of minor, or if he is of minor or unsound mind, he is incapable to be bound by the contract, and also incapable to bind the agent through contract. If the principal himself is a minor or an unsound mind, he cannot bind the agent, or he cannot be bound by the acts of the agent. If agent does something, he cannot be made liable if he is a minor or of unsound mind. Although there is one more point, although the minor cannot appoint an agent, still the guardian of the minor, one who is taking care of the minor, can appoint an agent to enter into some business transaction. There the guardian is there, where a guardian is there for a minor, then the contract can be entered on behalf of the principal. Got it? Clear with this point? So the principal should be competent to the contract. Just give some brief introduction that he becomes personally liable. There is a contractual relationship, therefore he needs to be competent. Even the third parties need to be competent. Even when he cannot enter the contract, that is, the principal cannot enter the contract, even the agent cannot be brought into the contract. Simple? Okay, we'll move on to the next one. The agent may not be competent to the contract. That is given under section 184. Now you may ask me, section 184 says that agent may not be. Here you said the principal should be, but here may not be. May not be, may not be. So it means that there are, basically this agent is entering into two contracts when he is appointed as an agent. The number one is, he is negotiating between the principal and the agent and entering the contract on behalf of the principal. Point number one. Second one is, there is a contractual relationship between the principal and the agent. So there again he is entering a contract. So you can divide it into two. That is what your section 184 also says. You can divide it into two and understand for a better and easy understanding. So the capacity of the agent can be two. Agent to act on behalf of the principal. So let's discuss this point. Agent to act on behalf of the principal. We saw from the definition, and everywhere I told you that initially, that agent is acting on behalf of whom? The principal, right? Now, when he is acting on behalf of the principal, the question what we are discussing here is about the competence again. So, when coming to the competence, the two important points which I said you is, first one is, he is of an age of a majority, was the first thing in order to be competent, and the other one is, he should be of sound mind. I told you this before. Now, the question here is, ma'am, when he is acting on behalf of a principal, whatever the principal is saying, is obeying that. Do you think even a minor cannot enter such contract? Even the minor can become an agent and can go and say to the third party whatever the principal has told him. Don't you think then he can enter into a contract? So what it says is, under section 184, yes, even if he is a minor or is an incompetent person also, still he can act as an agent only when he is acting on behalf of a principal. Because whatever the words are said by the principal, the same has to be repeated, that's it. The principal says, this particular transaction we are entering from this date to this date, with start date to the end date he gave, and the price, he quotes some price amount, and that price amount should be told, and with the terms and conditions of the contract has to be told to the third party. If he is able to do so, then it is fine. Even the person who is not competent also, or a minor also, can do this. So here it says, the beginning of your section 184 itself, it says that any person can enter a contract even though he is not of age of majority or he is of unsound mind. So it says that a person who is also incompetent can become an agent on behalf of the principal. Only condition is he should be able to say whatever the principal has told him. That's it. So if he is able to do so, then yes. So here at this point, he is just acting as a necessary link between the principal and the third person. He is not party to it at all. He is just a link between the two. So most important thing is, the two parties, that is the principal and the third party, need to be competent. They should understand the terms and conditions. That is more important here. So under this, the first part of your section 184 says that since he is acting on behalf of the principal, if he is able to utter the same thing whatever the principal has told, okay, fine, he can be a agent even if though he is a minor or incompetent person. Yeah, we'll go to the next part. Capacity of agent to bind himself and the principal. Capacity of the agent to bind himself, that is agent and principal. Now this point says that when the agency relationship is entered by the agent and the principal, don't you think the agent should understand what is the terms and conditions? He should be able to understand that he is entering such and such contract and he is going to represent the principal before the third party, and if at all they have fixed some commission or something, that also should be discussed. He should be knowing, he should have that understanding that at least something is in the contract, something about the contract of agency. If at all he is not able to understand, then there is no point in entering the contract of agency. So here, in order to bind the agent and the principal, he should understand, he should be competent to understand the terms and conditions of the contract. So section 184 says that yes, the agent should be competent to understand the contract that he is entering with the principal. The agent is entering with the principal. So this is the second point, very important, competent. Overall, by seeing all these points, here it says not necessary, but here the agent should be able to understand. But still, if he is a minor, if he is able to understand, in spite of incompetence also, he can understand what are the terms and conditions, what is he doing, he is acting on behalf of the principal. If he is able to understand, yes, he can enter. If at all he is not able to understand, no, he cannot enter. Is the final conclusion here. Okay? The agent may not be competent to the contract. That's given under section 184. Now let's go to the last essential or last feature of the agency, that is no consideration necessary to create agency. Section 185. Here section 185 says that no consideration. Why no consideration? Why should the agent not be given any remuneration? But here this provision says that, section 185 says that, and the Indian Contract Act not required. Still, they are remunerated. They should be remunerated for their work, right? So the principal, why actually no consideration? I just try to explain. So the principal is bound by the acts of the agent. Principal authorizes the agent and he is bound by whatever acts he performs, right? If at all he does something wrong and some loss has been incurred, who has to bear it? Principal has to bear it. So now it is principal's duty. If at all, if the agent has spent some money from his pocket for the principal's contract, then it is the duty of the principal to indemnify him at that time. I am talking about the consideration. So if at all, point number one, when he will be given some amount is or some money is given to Ernest, when there is some loss occurred to the agent, when he incurs some loss for the principal, from his pocket he is spending the money, then the principal is bound to indemnify for the agent, since he is bound by the acts of agent, right? The principal is bound by the acts of agent. Okay. A case law which we have discussed under contract of indemnity, Adamson versus Jarvis, is apt to take that case law here and explain it again. You can say that what happens in that case, I hope all of you remember, there was a plaintiff who was an auctioneer and there was also a defendant. This defendant approaches the plaintiff, who is the auctioneer, and tells him that, see, I have certain cattle, please sell this cattle and I need some money. The plaintiff, that is the auctioneer, in the good faith sells it. After some days, the real owner comes and tells to the plaintiff, who gave you the authority to sell my cattle? I am the real owner of this cattle. And that real owner files a case against the plaintiff. Now plaintiff files a case against defendant, saying that he himself told that to be a owner and he is not a owner, there is someone who is a owner, and the plaintiff has incurred a loss by compensating to the real owner. The court said that when the plaintiff filed the case against the defendant, the court said that there is an implied agency relationship created between the plaintiff and the defendant. That is, the plaintiff became the agent and the defendant became the principal. He gave an authority to sell his cattle. Though it did not belong to the defendant, still the agent in good faith has sold it. So thereby, now it is the duty of the principal to indemnify the losses that is caused to the agent, that is to the plaintiff. This was held. Got it? I hope you all remember this case. So when it comes to consideration, indemnifying the losses, whatever is caused to the agent by the plaintiff, has to be borne by the principal. Point number one, clear? The law does not say any particular consideration. See, you have to give some consideration and all is not given as per this section. It clearly says that no consideration is necessary. So when it says, do you think that there is no consideration necessary for his work? It is necessary. Usually what happens, he is remunerated through commission. He will be given certain commission for entering the contracts with a third party, or is doing any work on behalf of the principal, then he will be given certain commission. That can also form his consideration. Though formally it is never said that as per section 185 that he should get a consideration, but still he can get certain amount as his remuneration. One is for losses, he will be definitely indemnified, that is provided by the law very much itself. That yes, clearly it says, whatever the acts of the principal. Always remember the basic concept. The principal is bound by the acts of the agent. If he does anything wrong, it is always the principal is always liable to pay, right? So in case if the agent incurs losses, who has to pay them? Without the mistake of the agent? Yes, the principal has to indemnify for the losses. So I told you that there's nothing given formally that he should enter into a contract. I'll just explain that in an example. There is a person who undertakes the responsibility on behalf of co-sharers of a property. There is a property, a big plot, and that property is shared by more than 2 or 3 persons. Let's assume four people are taking that plot, and he says that he undertakes a responsibility that he'll apply the application. I mean, he'll make an application concerning that land for anything relating to revenue, any law that is relating to land revenues. He comes and he says, "You don't worry. I'll take the responsibility for making an application under law of land revenue." So now, here, there was no commission at all decided. Still, he has undertaken a responsibility. So, what is his responsibility now? He has taken a responsibility of an agent. He is saying, "I'll do it," and those co-sharers are giving him, authorizing him to do it. They say, "Yes, you can make an application on behalf of us under the law relating to land revenues." This is a simple example. Here, who is the agent? Agent is a person who is undertaking a responsibility. Who is the principal? Those co-sharers of the land. Clear with us? So, in order to sum up the features of a contract, the principal should always be competent to the contract since it's a main party. The contract, he should be competent to the contract. Section 183. The second point says that the agent may not be competent to the contract. That's given under section 184. You can divide it into parts and you can understand the capacity of the agent to act on behalf of principal, even the minor and person who is incompetent, but still can say what exactly the principal has ordered. The same thing, if he is able to utter same words spoken by the principal, then yes, he can be an agent. Here, but when the agent himself is binding him into a contract of agency with his principal, he should be competent for that. He should understand it. The third and last one is no consideration is necessary. This section 185 says there is no consideration necessary. Formally it says no consideration at all for the agent. But still, for any losses, who has to indemnify? The principal has to indemnify the agent. And also, his remuneration sometimes are given by the way of some commission.